everybody, this is Barbara and Brittany with
guys.
Solve Learning Disabilities, and we put together a 3-part video series on dyslexia. We get a lot of questions about dyslexia and we specialize in that. So we decided to send you guys a few free videos talking about it. This first one is going to be about the dyslexia difference. They do learn differently and you hear that a lot, and we're going to talk about that difference. The second video we send is going to be some quick hacks and accommodations that will make their life easier right now. And make some reading and writing and spelling easier for them right off the bat. Just some little changes you can make. And then the third video is going to be some exercises we give you from a brain integration standpoint that helps activate the parts of the brain that are necessary for fluent reading. So let's get right into it.
Great.
So the first thing, we're going to go into the dyslexia difference. First of all, dyslexia is a brain-based learning difficulty. So we had to know what's different in the dyslexic brain. But first, I want to say that one thing we do know is these kids are super brilliant. They're more likely to become millionaires. They're better at problem-solving capabilities. They're more visual and artistic. They're better at three-dimensional imaging in their mind, so they make great architects and engineers if they can make it through college, because it's a real struggle. But they're really great at three-dimensional stuff, which makes them really good inventors. And they're better at thinking outside of the box and having more creative thinking. They are also better at seeing the big picture, so they can see the end result better, the big picture of what needs to be accomplished to achieve a goal. And so it helps with that. They also are super good at great pattern recognition. In the war, they'd bring some of them in to help them decode because they could see patterns in words and numbers better than other people. They also have better peripheral vision, oddly enough. And they're super good at reading situations, like in negotiations in rooms and things like that. Then they're super good at reading situations and other people's other people's likes and dislikes and things like that. So the BBC network in London actually did a study on self-made millionaires, and they were surprised to find out that 40% of them were dyslexic and did poorly in school. And here in America, they say that about 1 in 3 American entrepreneurs have dyslexia. So they are super brilliant. Now, why do they make such good entrepreneurs? Number one, they're really good at problem-solving capabilities, above average. And they, like I mentioned, they can connect unthought of things together to make a solution, which makes them really great at inventing or creating companies. And they've learned to persevere past failure. They can totally bomb reading in front of the class one day or get an F on their writing assignment, and they still show up the next day and keep going, and they persevere. And that carries over into their adulthood, so that when they're entrepreneurs, they just keep going. They meet with failure and keep going. They also have super high IQs, especially with right brain skills. So because of all these wonderful abilities that they have, some people don't even want to call it a disability. And that's fine. They are super brilliant, and we can't take that away. But with my son, I noticed that it did create a big struggle in school. So to me, it was a learning disability as he was growing up. They see other kids their age reading at the expected levels and understanding their assignments, and they have to be pulled aside into, a special reading group or tutoring out in the hallway, or like a special education program that they have to go to a few times a week, and that's really embarrassing to them. And so it causes withdrawal socially, and then they lose confidence, and then they start to hate school. They even start to think of themselves as quote-unquote dumb or not smart. And these kids work 10 times harder to achieve the same results as their classmates. So, like I mentioned, I should know. My son went through this. He'd come home defeated and exhausted and really aggravated. And when he walked out the door to go to school, I would pray that it would all connect that day. Like if he had a test, please let it connect for him. And sometimes it seemed like some days he did do better and other days it didn't connect as well. And I didn't realize that that is actually what we're talking about, is connections in the brain. At that point, I didn't know this. But practice, it didn't work for him. It helped a little, but we needed to find another intervention. We needed to find something that would get into the root cause of the weakness and strengthen it. And so we looked and we actually did find one. And there's new information coming forth all the time with new scanning equipment and new information that they're learning how to help these kids. Dyslexia doesn't have to be lifelong anymore. And so we found it and we studied into it, we used it, it worked for us, and now we want to share it with you. And that's why we made these videos. So first of all, we're going to talk about what needs to be strengthened for automatic reading and comprehension in this video, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the unique way that dyslexics learn. So it's been proven over 100 years ago that specialists knew that dyslexia and other reading struggles were caused by a weakness in the left hemisphere of the brain. So when their patients had injuries or strokes in specific parts of the left side of the brain, some would lose their ability to understand language, others the ability to produce language, and others the ability to recognize written language such as reading. Now, this helped neurologists and doctors understand what parts of the brain were responsible for what functions. But a giant leap in locating the parts of the brain responsible for fluent reading came with the invention of the fMRI, which was the functional MRI that could scan brains while they were reading and doing activities. So once that was invented, it spurred a bunch of new research all around the world, and they all showed that good readers used the same part of the brain. So now doctors and scientists could see the parts of the brain that should be active when reading fluently. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get too sciencey here. I do want to give you enough, like a foundation of it, that you'll understand why some interventions work and some don't or barely do. But the good readers showed high activation and connection between these three parts of the brain, which are located in the left hemisphere of your brain. Now, the way it works, I want to focus this video on the word form area at the back lower part of the brain, and that's responsible for automatic word recognition. This is super important for fluent readers. This area is a junction where information from different senses converge to create a memory of a word and store and recall the meaning in an instant. So the look of the word from the eyes through the visual pathway, and the sound of the word from the ears through the auditory pathway, and then connecting it to pictures or visual memories in their mind of something. So, for example, when a word's seen during reading in milliseconds, the brain makes this connection to the word, its pronunciation, and its meaning, like the word tiger. So when I showed this word, you didn't have to sound out each word or think about which letters are silent and if G made the J or the G sound in this word. You didn't have to think hard about what those letters blended together to mean. You saw the word, and in an instant you knew it represented a big orange and black striped cat, right? So instantaneously that you might not even realize your brain connected it with a mental image of the tiger for an instant. This is called your Occipito Temporal lobe, or your word form area of your brain. And this is the part of the brain that skilled readers use to read fluently. Now, in 2001, there was a publication in the Nature Neuroscience. Some researchers there wrote about a study they did where they did fMRI imaging on the brain as they showed words to typical good readers. They mapped the areas of the brain that activated as they saw and read the words. The pic here shows the activated areas of the brain. And then they did fMRI imaging as they flashed words in front of the readers so briefly that only the subconscious could pick it up. And guess what? The word form area was the part that still activated to brief flashes of the words. It happened in like 150 milliseconds, which is quicker than a heartbeat. So this proved that the word recognition is automatic and subliminal after somebody has learned a word. So that was just word recognition. But here is fMRI results on fluent versus dyslexic readers. So imaging of typical fluent readers versus struggling readers show that the activation of the word form part of the brain is directly related to the ability to read well. Higher activation of the word form area equaled higher reading test scores, and lower activation equaled lower test scores. So after a child's broken down a new word and sounds it out a number of times, they should automatically recognize and connect it to a meaning in less than a second after seeing it, like the word cat or mom in the beginning, like you could do with tiger. No more sounding it out, it just happens automatically, right? Well, unfortunately, not for all. So Without intervention, dyslexic children may never store and recall the words automatically. They are forced to see it as a new word every time it comes up, and they have to sound it out again and again, even if they just did on the page before. Now, what's wrong with that? Unfortunately, lifelong slow reading with low comprehension, and they usually have to read the text over a couple times to get the meaning. So the reason the comprehension is low is because the part of the brain that connects the text to meaning activates best when the brain isn't busy sounding out words. So having to focus on every letter and syllable actually inhibits the brain's upper function to combine it all into meaning and store it into memory properly. Now, a dyslexic reader can struggle through 3 sentences, sounding out almost every word, and not be able to tell you one thing he just read. It's tragic. Like I said, these kids work 10 times harder than other kids for lower test scores, and it's exhausting, it's frustrating, it's embarrassing, it kills their self-confidence and causes them to withdraw academically and socially. So is hour after hour of practice the answer? Well, no. It can help, but it doesn't work the right parts of the brain for automaticity. We have to wake up that part of the brain and start using it enough that it will grow good, healthy neurological connections to the other parts of the brain. Sound hard? Well, it isn't. I mean, it's work, but it's not hard, and it's important. And it's actually easy enough to be done right at home. Now, we have to help them. I love the Understood.com saying I saw on a billboard that said 1 out of 5 children struggle with learning disabilities, and 5 out of 5 parents can help. It takes effort, but it's rewarding, and it changes their life. So back to the imaging, just a couple more things. The imaging did show that dyslexic and struggling readers use compensating parts of the brain to read. The key is the left hemisphere here is underactive, as you can see, but the pic above shows a comparison of fluent readers' activation compared to dyslexic readers' activation in their brain. The gray areas show the areas that we're activating. And as we showed, the word analysis and word form areas at the back left do not activate. But in the second pic here of the dyslexic reader, you can see that 2 parts of the right side of the brain activate. Now, the right side of the brain is more pictorial and it sees things in pictures. So these kids are visual learners because they think more in pictures, and we can use that to help us in helping them learn their words and spelling words and things like that. But one thing I want to mention here, there's this thing in all of us, I'm sure some of you have heard about it, it's called fight or flight. And it kicks in when we're scared, when we think we're exposed to danger. There's a survival mechanism. It's used mostly for running and fleeing from danger, but it causes your adrenals to produce a bunch of cortisol, and it makes your heart race and your sweat glands kick out a bunch of sweat and your hands go clammy. And because it pulls blood from the body's core down to your arms and legs, thinking that it needs to run from something, it usually makes kids feel sick and lightheaded and nauseous. Well, they found that these cute dyslexic kids often go into fight and flight if having to read out loud. So they're scared of messing up and being embarrassed in front of their teachers and other students. They want to run away or just disappear, and they're afraid of disappointing parents if they're reading in front of parents. And so they flip into this fight or flight mode in their body, which makes them feel really yucky. So when your child is called upon to read out loud in class, they'll actually feel sick and perform worse at reading than they would normally. So their already slow reading becomes slower and more mistakes. These poor kids. That's sad and it's humiliating for them. So now brain imaging has shown that with the right kind of intervention, they were able to get the parts of the left hemisphere of the brain active and the dyslexic readers reading and comprehending. So that's the good news. It can be helped now. Now, in video 2, we're going to talk about some quick hacks to help with spelling and word recognition right away using the pictorial part of their brain, because that's the strong part. And then video 3, we're going to talk about the right interventions which will help stimulate those parts of the brain necessary for fluent reading and comprehension. So we'll have the next video out to you guys in a few days. I hope you enjoyed this. Shoot us some emails. And be sure to share and like us if you think this is something that could help some other people too. So talk to you soon.